Imagine this moment tonight. The lights are off, your body is heavy, the day has finally loosened its grip. And just before you close your eyes, you speak 7 words. Not a prayer, not a mantra, not a ritual borrowed from any ancient tradition. Just 7 simple, deliberate words, spoken with presence, and those 7 words quietly decide what your unconscious will build while you sleep. Most people don't realize this, but the final inner state you carry into sleep is not neutral. It is instructional. It tells the unconscious what kind of reality to shape next. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He taught that the psyche never truly rests. When the conscious mind releases control, the unconscious begins its real work, sorting, compensating, correcting, and creating. Sleep is not absence. Sleep is activity. And yet most people fall asleep in conflict. They fall asleep replaying arguments that never resolved. They fall asleep with guilt tightening the chest. They fall asleep worrying about tomorrow, regretting yesterday, judging themselves for things that cannot be changed. They close their eyes while still at war with themselves. So the unconscious responds accordingly. It dreams in tension. It rehearses fear. It strengthens defensive patterns. It produces symbols of loss, threat, helplessness, and unfinished business. Not because it is cruel, but because it is obedient. The unconscious does not decide what grows. It grows what it is given. Jung described this moment before sleep as a threshold state, a liminal crossing where the ego loosens and deeper layers of the psyche become accessible. Whatever impression you place there acts like a seed embedded into the architecture of the inner world. That is why so many people wake up exhausted even after hours of sleep. That is why anxiety dreams repeat themselves. That is why emotional fatigue lingers without an obvious cause. The psyche continued the conflict overnight, but there is an antidote. Not control, not force, not positive thinking, intention. A conscious gesture made at the threshold. 7 words, spoken not to change the outer world, but to reorganize the inner one. These words are not powerful because of their vocabulary. They are powerful because of when they are spoken, how they are felt, and what they symbolize. Jung emphasized that the unconscious does not respond to logic. It responds to symbols, emotional tone, and ritualized meaning. A small, sincere act performed at the right psychological moment can outweigh hours of conscious effort. This is why elaborate affirmations often fail. They are spoken from the ego during the day, while defenses are fully active. But at night, those defenses soften, control weakens, listening deepens. The psyche becomes receptive. When you speak with humility at this moment, when you offer something rather than demand something, the unconscious listens. This is not about belief systems. It does not require faith in God, energy, or mysticism. It requires presence, because when you close your eyes and speak honestly to yourself, something ancient inside you recognizes the gesture. It recognizes surrender. It recognizes trust. It recognizes truth. That recognition is what changes the internal direction. Think of the unconscious as fertile ground. It does not judge seeds. It multiplies them. Plant fear, and fear grows. Plant resentment, and resentment spreads. Plant acceptance, and something begins to soften. This is why Jung viewed sleep as a dialogue, a sacred inner chamber where the self speaks in images, sensations, and dreams. And like any dialogue, it works both ways. You can speak to it, not with commands, not with pressure, but with alignment. 7 words, spoken slowly, without urgency, without expectation. You are not asking for miracles. You are not trying to force healing. You are signaling permission. Permission for the psyche to rest. Permission for the inner judge to stand down. Permission for the nervous system to release vigilance. And when permission is given, something extraordinary happens quietly. Dreams begin to shift. The body rests more deeply. Thoughts lose their sharp edges upon waking. Self-criticism weakens. A subtle kindness toward yourself appears where tension once lived, not overnight as spectacle, but overnights as pattern. Jung believed that real transformation rarely arrives through dramatic insight. It arrives through small, repeated, symbolic acts that realign the psyche from the inside out. This is one of those acts. These 7 words are not meant to be rushed. They are not meant to be spoken mechanically. They are meant to be felt. You lie down. You let the body sink. You breathe once, slowly, then again, then a third time, and only then do you speak, softly, internally or aloud, as if you are speaking to something older than thought, as if you are placing the day down rather than carrying it with you. You do not analyze the words. You do not expect results. You do not monitor outcomes. You simply offer them and rest. This is not surrender in the sense of defeat. It is surrender in the sense of trust. Trust that the part of you beneath effort knows how to restore balance if you stop interfering. Jung called this a return to the self, the deeper organizing center of the psyche that operates beyond fear, beyond control, beyond ego struggle. When you sleep in alignment with that center, the psyche does not need to shout through symptoms. It whispers through insight, and this is only the beginning, because once the unconscious learns that you are willing to listen, the dialogue deepens, symbols grow clearer, resistance softens, healing accelerates without force. 7 words, 1 threshold, a silent agreement with yourself. Before the eyes close, before the world fades, before the unconscious begins its work. This is not about changing your life tonight. It is about changing how your life is shaped while you rest. And that changes everything that follows. Presence is everything. When you speak, the unconscious listens, not selectively, not critically, it listens completely. When you close your eyes with humility and speak inwardly, slowly, sincerely, even if you don't fully know who you are speaking to, the gesture itself becomes meaningful. It becomes a bridge, a threshold, a form of inner prayer, whether you believe in God, energy, psychology, or nothing beyond yourself. Belief is not the requirement. Sincerity is. What matters most is what you offer the psyche in the final moment of the day, because the unconscious is like fertile earth. It does not argue with what you plant. It does not reject seeds. It simply grows whatever is placed within it. Plant worry, and it grows tension. Plant fear, and it grows vigilance. Plant resentment, and it grows defense. But plant trust, and something else begins to move. This is why Jung compared inner work to tending a garden. You don't force growth, you create conditions. You choose what you place in the soil. You return consistently. You allow time. Sleep is not passive, it is a process, a nightly descent into the symbolic core of the psyche, and the unconscious uses whatever you leave at the surface of your soul as raw material. Most people never choose consciously. They collapse into sleep carrying the weight of the day and then wonder why their nights feel heavy, their dreams chaotic, their mornings drained. But when you understand this, you begin to care for sleep differently. You stop treating it as collapse. You begin treating it as cultivation. The 7 words you will come to know are not solutions. They are seeds. They do not fix your life overnight, but they awaken something that has been dormant. And once that awakening begins, everything slowly reorganizes around it. There is a kind of peace that cannot be achieved through effort, a peace that arrives only when resistance ends. A peace that is received, not forced. And often, that peace is just one honest sentence away. You may wonder how something so simple could carry real power. The truth is, the power is not in the number, and not even in the words themselves. It is in how the unconscious interprets the gesture. Jung said the soul cannot be commanded into transformation. It opens through proximity, through listening, through symbols that touch rather than instructions that demand. That is why even the most beautiful affirmations fail when spoken mechanically. They carry no weight because they carry no presence. But a few words spoken truthfully at the right moment can penetrate what logic cannot reach. The rational mind resists change. Its function is to protect, to control, to repeat what is known, even when the known is no longer healthy. But at night, when the body lies down and the ego loosens its grip, that control weakens, just briefly. And in that space, between the outer world and the inner self, you are allowed to plant something new. Many spiritual traditions speak of words before sleep, not as superstition, but as symbolic acts, as bridges, as offerings. The transformation they initiate is not magical, it is structural, because when you speak intentionally, you send a message inward. I choose a different relationship with myself. I allow rest. I permit peace. I release control. If these words are repeated, not as obligation, but as devotion, something responds. Not necessarily outside you, but inside you, where everything begins. Dreams begin to soften. The body rests more deeply. Morning thoughts lose their sharpness. Self-judgment loosens its grip. And gradually, without force, you begin to treat yourself with more kindness. Jung believed that when the unconscious recognizes a new pattern, one that is intentional, symbolic, and repeated, it responds, not with promises, but with movement, with synchronicities, with insights, with inner shifts that make outer changes possible. It is as if something within you says, I hear you. Now let me work. And life begins to feel lighter, more coherent, more connected to something that was always present, but drowned out by noise. These 7 words are only the beginning, because the unconscious is not a storage unit for unwanted thoughts. It is a living system, a symbolic field in constant dialogue with consciousness, the birthplace of dreams, intuitions, fears, longings, and the deepest calls of the soul. Speaking to it is not issuing commands to a machine, it is whispering inside a sacred inner chamber. That is why these words must never be spoken casually, not from obligation, not as a trick, not as a spell. They are an intimate gesture, an act of listening, a reverent moment reserved only for you. Imagine lying down, the room quiet, the world outside fading. You are not deciding to sleep, you are deciding to release. You feel the weight of your body against the bed. You breathe once, then again, and then you speak, softly, honestly. You do not wait for miracles. You do not demand outcomes. You do not force positivity. You simply allow the unconscious to receive what it understands best: tone, intention, emotional truth. It absorbs these words like soil absorbs a seed, because it understands images, sensations, and feelings, not arguments. Jung saw sleep as the doorway where the ego arrives at peace and the deeper self emerges. Whatever you place at that doorway stays. It germinates. Sleep is not a pause in life. It is a continuation of it directed inward. When you end the day differently, the psyche begins to move differently. You are no longer trying to control everything with reason. You are trusting a wiser, older layer of yourself. Jung called this returning to the self, the central organizing force of the psyche that knows even when the ego forgets. As sleep aligns you with that center, dreams become messages. Thoughts thin. The soul breathes. 7 words, spoken at the right moment, with presence, with devotion. They are more than a sentence. They are a decision, a silent pact with yourself, and that pact is where real transformation begins, not out of duty, not as an obligation, not as a ritual performed mechanically. This is not a spell, it is not a trick, it is not a formula meant to force anything to happen. It is an intimate gesture, an act of listening, a reverent moment that belongs only to you. Imagine this clearly. You lie down. You turn off the lights. The noise of the day fades. The world outside slowly withdraws. And for the first time all day, you are not doing anything. You are not deciding to sleep. You are deciding to let go. You take a slow breath. You feel the weight of your body against the mattress. You feel gravity holding you instead of you holding yourself together. And then, gently, without urgency, without expectation, you speak the 7 words, not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely. After that, you rest. You do not wait for a miracle. You do not demand a result. You do not force positive thinking. You simply allow, because the unconscious does not respond to pressure. It responds to permission. It absorbs these words the way soil absorbs a seed. Not intellectually, not logically, but symbolically. The unconscious understands images, sensations, emotions, tone. It does not work through argument. It works through meaning. This is why Jung understood sleep as a threshold, a gateway through which the ego loosens its grip and the deeper self begins to rise. When the ego finally quiets, the soul has space to emerge, and whatever is offered at that threshold does not disappear. It stays, it settles, it begins to grow. Most people forget this. They think sleep is a pause, a shutdown, an absence, but sleep is a process, a dialogue, a silent inward journey. Every night you cross from the outer world into the inner one, and the way you cross matters. If you cross carrying condemnation, tension multiplies. If you cross carrying fear, fear organizes itself. If you cross carrying guilt, the inner judge grows louder. But when you cross carrying acceptance, trust, release, and gratitude, something rearranges. You are no longer trying to control everything with reason. You are handing control back to the most ancient and intelligent part of you. Jung called this the return to the self, the center of the psyche, the part of you that knows, even when you forget that it knows. When sleep aligns you with that center, something subtle happens. Dreams begin to speak more clearly, thoughts lose their sharp edges, the nervous system softens, the soul exhales. 7 words, spoken at the right moment, with presence, with devotion. They are not just words, they become a decision, a quiet agreement with yourself, a silent inner pact. And that pact is where real transformation begins, because true healing, as Jung reminded us, does not come from grand theories. It comes from small encounters with truth. Sometimes a single, honest sentence is enough to interrupt an entire cycle of self-sabotage. So now breathe. Imagine yourself lying in bed, the room dark, the world outside still, silence settling in, and there in that liminal space you whisper inwardly, I accept, I trust, I let go. Thank you. Good night. 7 words. I accept. Because resisting reality exhausts you. Acceptance does not mean surrendering your power. It means saying, I see what is, and I allow it to be acknowledged. The unconscious needs this permission to make space for the new, I trust, because the mind lives in fear, but the soul does not. Trust means loosening your grip, even when you don't have all the answers. It is the key that dissolves excessive control. I let go. Because transformation cannot happen under constant observation. Letting go means releasing what hurts, even when you don't yet know what comes next. It is one of the most courageous acts a human being can perform. Thank you, because gratitude is where the unconscious begins to bloom. Gratitude turns lack into abundance, absence into presence. It soothes the fractured places inside you. Good night. Because even this is intentional. The spoken word is sacred. You are not simply going to sleep. You are returning to your most intimate inner space. You are saying, I am at peace for today. That is enough. 7 words, 3 breaths, 1 act of devotion. You may write them down, place them by your bed, whisper them, think them, feel them. What matters is not the method. It is the gesture, the moment, the intention. Because in the end, this sentence is not here to change the world. It is here to remind you who you are before the world tells you otherwise. Imagine this. You fall asleep this way, calm in your chest, your nervous system finally held instead of strained. And when you do, something subtle but profound shifts. Because, as Jung understood, the outer world is a mirror of the inner one. When something truly changes inside you, what surrounds you begins, slowly, inevitably, to reorganize itself. You may feel it the very first night, not dramatically, not explosively, just a slight release, a deeper breath, a softer descent into sleep. Your body, which used to resist rest, no longer fights it as hard. Your thoughts, once sharp and repetitive, lose some of their urgency. Your heart, which used to race without reason, begins to slow, matching the rhythm of your breathing. By the second night, something else happens. The thoughts still appear, but they don't grip you the same way. They pass more quickly. The body settles faster. Sleep arrives with less negotiation. And by the third night, something inside you begins to recognize itself. Not because the world has spoken to you, but because you have finally spoken to yourself. Jung believed that much of human suffering does not come from pain itself, but from the silence between what the soul is asking for and what the conscious mind refuses to hear. Night after night, most people widen that gap. They drown it in noise, distraction, exhaustion, and unresolved tension. But when you repeat these 7 words, softly, sincerely, you begin to stitch that thread back together. You rebuild the bridge, and this return changes everything, not through effort, not through struggle, but through alignment. You may notice that anger softens without you trying to fix it. Resentment loses its grip. Problems that once felt overwhelming don't vanish, but they shrink, not because they changed, but because you did. It is as if life responds quietly. Now that you can hear yourself, I can speak. And it does, subtly, through a dream that lingers longer than usual, through an unexpected insight, through a thought that arrives without force and then leaves without fear, through someone who once drained you and now passes through your awareness like a cloud. These are not coincidences. Jung called them synchronicities, meaningful alignments that arise when inner and outer worlds begin to resonate, not because reality bends magically, but because perception clears. You begin to see what was always there but previously drowned out by inner noise. You grow lighter, more lucid, calmer. What once pulled at you no longer hooks you because the soul has rediscovered its internal agreement. The unconscious no longer needs to shout. It has been acknowledged. Sleep is no longer an escape. It becomes a return home. 7 words, 3 nights, a beginning. Do not expect fireworks. Do not wait for miracles. Instead, observe. Notice how your energy shifts, how people respond differently, how situations that once felt chaotic begin, slowly, to reorganize themselves. Not because the world changed, but because you did, at the only place where real change ever begins. Jung did not see sleep as rest alone. He saw it as a journey of the soul. As the outer world quiets, the unconscious awakens. And in that space, without control, without masks, without performance, the deeper truth emerges. At night, the psyche reveals what the day kept hidden. Symbols rise, images speak, memories surface, unexpressed desires find form, not to punish you, but to guide you. And that is why this moment matters. Because when you end your day with a symbol of peace, when you consciously choose your final words, you are not just saying good night. You are whispering to your deepest self, I am ready to listen. I am ready to return. This simple act marks the beginning of what Jung called individuation. Individuation does not mean isolation. It does not mean becoming special or superior. It means becoming whole. It means gathering the forgotten, repressed, fragmented parts of yourself and allowing them to reunite. And this process does not begin with grand transformation. It begins with small, faithful gestures. It begins when you stop fighting yourself at night, when you stop dragging unresolved battles into sleep, when the last thing you offer your inner world is not tension, but permission. And if you decide that this will be the final message you give yourself each night, then something ancient inside you responds, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily. Because when the soul finally feels heard, it no longer needs to suffer in silence. And that is where the real work begins. When your soul is allowed to fall asleep this way, the final voice it hears is no longer guilt, fear, or self-reproach. It is acceptance, it is trust, it is devotion, it is gratitude. And even if, at first, this feels like nothing more than a symbolic ritual, something real is already taking place. Because this moment, this quiet threshold between wakefulness and sleep, is more honest than most of the words you speak during the day. Here, there is no audience, no performance, no defense, no mask to maintain. What you offer here comes directly from presence, and the unconscious recognizes presence instantly. It begins responding immediately, not with noise, not with drama, but with images, sensations, subtle inspirations. Old memories surface, not to wound you, but to be reorganized. Long obsolete emotional patterns begin to loosen. Tensions that have lived in your nervous system for years quietly dissolve without effort. The soul does not need complex formulas. It needs to be acknowledged. It needs space, it needs sincerity. And when you sleep in peace, this is when healing begins to unfold naturally. The unconscious listens even when you believe it does not. It answers even when you think nothing is happening. When you fall asleep carrying fear, it amplifies fear. When you fall asleep carrying resentment, it rehearses resentment. But when you fall asleep carrying gratitude, even for things you do not yet fully understand, something profound shifts. This is where everything begins to reorganize. You are no longer sleeping to escape life. You are sleeping to return to yourself. And in that return, it does not matter how long you have been away. The soul always remembers the path home. The next morning arrives differently, not dramatically, not with fireworks. Nothing external may appear altered at all. The world looks the same. The sounds are familiar. The responsibilities remain. And yet, something is undeniably different. Your first thought is quieter. Your body feels less tense. Small irritations no longer pierce as deeply. Traffic does not wound you the way it used to. A memory may arise, but it no longer pulls you under. You observe it, and it passes. This is how the unconscious responds, not through sudden miracles, but through atmosphere, through tone, through rhythm, through the way you inhabit your own body, through how gently you speak to yourself, through how much resistance you no longer need to carry. Jung believed that life becomes unbearable, not because of suffering itself, but because the unconscious and conscious remain divided. Healing begins when these two finally begin to speak the same language, when awareness no longer fights what the soul already knows, and this reunification does not begin with grand insight. It begins with small, faithful acts. You notice it in the smallest ways. You choose your words more carefully. You forgive more easily. You accuse yourself less. Decisions that once felt internally violent now feel simpler. You pause before reacting. You listen before judging. You wait instead of forcing, not because you watched a video, not because you memorized ideas, but because, for 3 nights in a row, you spoke directly to yourself, to that quiet intelligence that has lived inside you long before language, long before fear, long before expectation. 7 words, 1 reconnection. Jung said that suffering begins where love is withdrawn, and love, in its truest sense, begins when you stop abandoning yourself. These words are not spells, they are reminders, reminders that you are allowed to rest, that peace is not something you earn, it is something you are worthy of, that being heard begins with listening, inward. When you fall asleep intentionally, the world feels different the next day, not because the world changed, but because you did. You become more whole, and the world responds to wholeness. The same challenges still appear, the same responsibilities remain, but you no longer meet them fragmented. There is now a center, a root, a quiet place inside you that listens before reacting, and that center was born there, in the silence of your room, in the final breath of the night, in the 7 words you had the courage to speak. Jung believed that what you repeat with intention becomes a seed in the unconscious, and given time, that seed grows roots, roots that hold you steady during storms, roots that anchor you when life becomes uncertain. That is why these 7 words are not limited to 3 nights. They can become yours, a silent ritual, a private agreement with the night, a gentle return again and again to the part of you that already knows how to rest, how to trust, how to be whole. And once that begins, nothing is ever quite the same again. The moment arrives when the world finally fades and you are left alone with yourself. There is no perfect timing for this, no ideal posture, no obligation to perform it correctly. There is only this moment, a darkened room, a tired body, a quiet soul that is ready, finally, to be received. And in that moment, something important is remembered. You cannot carry everything. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to resolve everything before sleep arrives. You only need to accept, to trust, to let go, to feel gratitude, and to allow the night to take you, to wish yourself good night in this way, truly not as a habit or a polite phrase, but as a silent blessing, is to send a message far deeper than words. It is to say to the universe, and more importantly to yourself, tonight I treat myself with respect. Tonight I take myself seriously. Tonight I offer myself peace. And the universe, if we are to use that word, does not respond to what is spoken from the mouth. It responds to what is spoken from the soul. It does not answer with applause or spectacle, but with subtle order, with clearer paths, with the right encounters, with a gentleness that once felt unreachable. Carl Jung understood that symbolic repetition heals. Each time you repeat a gesture with intention, you strengthen a truth within yourself. Over time, what begins as a ritual stops feeling like something you do and starts becoming something you are. You grow calmer, more present, more whole. Not because you have learned how to control life, but because you have learned how to trust something deeper than control. You have learned how to speak inwardly and how to listen. The 7 words are only the beginning. Practice deepens them, consistency gives them roots, and change becomes inevitable because any soul that is truly heard begins to unfold naturally. Each night you accept yourself is a quiet field where the unconscious works unseen. Nothing dramatic announces it. No one else notices. No one knows you have begun speaking 7 words before sleep. No one sees that you have started taking a silent medicine for your inner life. But you will know. You will feel it in your body, in your breathing, in how you move through the world, in how you respond instead of react. You will notice that something no longer grips you as tightly, that you listen more, that you demand less. That pain, though still present, is no longer suppressed. It is held with awareness. Jung said that true awakening does not arrive with noise. It does not come with thunder or spectacle. It happens quietly on an ordinary night, when you suddenly realize that peace has returned, that there is space inside you again, and it often begins with something so small it almost feels insignificant. 7 words, 3 nights, 1 sincere gesture. Not the size of the act transforms you, but the truth with which it is done. If this has stirred something within you, if these words opened a window where heaviness or silence once lived, do not treat this as advice. Treat it as a seed. Someone near you may still be sleeping at war with themselves, just as you once were. And sometimes all that is needed is a reminder, an invitation, a quiet way back home. You may become that breath, because sometimes a single sentence, spoken with love, changes the course of an entire life. Accept, trust, let go. Thank you. Good night. Tonight, you have come home.